I'm going to cover my birds real quick. One second.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the next episode of Spare Speaks. Today we are going to talk about the libertarian debate with the one and only Henry Marroquin.
Hello.
He doesn't know too much about libertarianism, but he's been listening to me long enough that he's basically a scholar at this point.
Oh, hello. I'm a apprentice here.
So Henry has watched the libertarian debate, and I wanted to do this podcast because I wanted to kind of like walk through some basic libertarian concepts with somebody who is not a libertarian and try and convince him that he probably is a libertarian. So I'm going to baptize you today, Henry.
Yeah, well, I think in our previous conversations, I forget, on Us and Universe podcast, we talked about it, and I kind of do have a lot of libertarian principles. Um, Mostly personal, though. When it comes to the whole government and the inner workings of all that, I don't know. So,
That's a good place to start. The difference between the individual and the collective. Because I think Margaret Thatcher, she was like a old school like British politician, and something that she said was that she doesn't believe in society. She said that society doesn't exist, and what she was saying was the collective doesn't exist. It's a fiction. The fact that somebody in New York should abide by the same laws as somebody in Utah or Wyoming is is wrong, because the culture is so different. There shouldn't be one governing law that applies to everybody, because it's never going to serve everybody appropriately. And that's why libertarians are kind of like, they're more on the side of like a Confederate style government.
well, what's a Confederate style government? Basically, independent states do their own thing and kind of come together for the really big things. Is that something?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And so the really big things would be national defense, maybe the collection of taxes, and depending on how radical of a libertarian you are, it can range from nothing to absolutely nothing that the federal government does to everything except education, or everything except the legal system, and so on and so forth. But how does that sound to you, the concept of a confederacy?
It
I,
sounds to me a lot more natural, and specifically with Margaret Thatcher's point, it makes sense that society on a global scale doesn't exist because we're creatures of tribes. We have such a long history of being in groups that are no larger than, I don't know, throw a number out there, 100. So once we're talking about, 300 million or however whatever the population is in the millions, it's kind of difficult to create equality for everybody because people do have individual circumstances that don't apply to other things in New York, for example.
right. You see, like, and the thing is, when you're talking, or when I'm talking to like a democratic liberal, a populist liberal, and I just say the word confederacy, they come back with the argument that, oh well, slaves are allowed in a confederacy. That
Yeah.
then that gives the state the power to oppress people.
Well, I would imagine that that's just a trigger that people are so used to hearing the Confederacy is from the Civil War, the South, and that side of the United States that existed at some point. But there's more of a proper definition to what a Confederacy is, right? It has nothing to do with that uh, flag that people put on their trucks and talking about the South will rise again. That's not the Confederacy that you're talking about, right?
Right, exactly. That's what's hard about having these kind of conversations, because so many of these words are attached to so many other ideas and emotions that it's hard to have a clear conversation about them.
Exactly. Even the Libertarian Party. It sounds like in the debate I heard us also say it sounds like libertine, and how it's sort of this what kind of connotation it has, sort of like this hippie living in the woods barefoot and
Yeah,
me alone.
young,
Yeah.
naive.
Yeah, exactly. Young and naive. So even that word alone could turn off a lot of people, I could see, especially when you don't delve deeper into having a conversation about principles versus I'm in this party and you're in that party and we're against each other, you know?
It's so funny, man. One of the great things about being a libertarian right now is that in 2008 and in 2007, when the noble saint Ron Paul made his debut and really brought libertarianism to the forefront, everybody was saying it was like it's like everybody was saying about Ron Paul what they're saying to the about candidates today, like racist. They said Ron Paul was too old. They said like um, that was the first time like somebody wasn't getting immediate attention. Like the Ron Paul would never get a lot of time in the debates, and now all those same things are occurring again um, now. So it's like, and it's being used against Democrats. It's being used against Republicans. And 8 years ago, dude, this this outrage system was not nearly as big as it is now. And libertarians got the brunt, like a big hit on. Well, libertarianism was one of the first casualties of that in my experience, and now I see it just like growing into this grotesque monster that's eating itself, and it's just like it's just funny to see that process.
You mean the whole system in general? The not particular to a party, but just the method which we go about electing and presenting people to be elected.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just so like whether you're a libertarian or you're not, or you think Ron Paul's crazy or not, whatever. It was just hard to watch him be demonized by irrational emotional arguments that didn't make any sense. And now all those arguments are being used against themselves, you know. The system is eating itself. So it's just funny to see that. But that's neither here nor there. So
Yeah.
let me ask you another libertarian question. Let me think. What was in the
Well, yeah. Previous last night on my podcast, you said you were going to leave me with a question, and it was if I think. Are you breathing heavy? What's going
I
on?
am. I'm just excited.
Oh wow. Okay, so you asked me a question about how what was it? The free market, if it should, if it. Do you remember the question? I'm having a hard time remembering the
Yes,
question.
yeah. What is more conducive to? Because we were talking about. You said one of the best things we can do is, as far as like what makes a good person, is to allow other people to be successful. You know, don't do things that are going to prevent people from not being able to be successful in whatever they're trying to do, whether it's money or art or whatever.
Right.
So then I said, what is more conducive to an individual's success, a free market or a controlled market? And that's a major point of contention with whether you're like a libertarian or what's called an authoritarian, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. I mean, when you I'm not sure if you can hear me. Am I
Oh, I can
good?
hear you. I can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just making sure because I was just hearing you. And anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I would like to think that there should be no regulation and then there should be completely free market. But originally, this idea of control or regulation comes from trying to protect something, whether it's the environment as a collective. We're all doing our own little independent thing, but collectively, our actions accumulate into this one big catastrophe that is, environmental change. And then at the same note, large corporations in a free market, if they aren't monitored, if there's no principles that guide them and regulate them, they can screw over a lot of people because our world is so interconnected now that one event could trickle into a crisis, whether it's somebody hacking into a corporation's server with personal data. Free market. I don't know exactly what that means in terms of how is there no control? Is this just all right, have at it, or is it more in the sense of taxing or laws that basically handle money? But do you understand my question? Like it's kind of
Oh yeah, definitely.
trying to get a grasp on what that idea is, where it is, if it's just economic or if it also relative to people's safety and the environment and the
Okay.
physical.
So that's a very good question because that's a major point of confusion with libertarianism. Um, like I said in the last podcast, there's the two core ethical principles of libertarianism are do no harm and respect for personal property. And the way you gain personal property is based on John Locke's view of personal property, which is whatever you build with your own hands or, pay to get built for you belongs to you. So with those two concepts, do no harm and property rights, that's the foundation of every law that's created and every practice and all that. So within those confines, if you can, that's the limit of regulation. So that it's not totally anarchy. There are core ethical boundaries, and as far as like protection of people go, it's not. It's this hasn't been really hammered out in the libertarian view, but it's kind of like, in my view, it's kind of like a not survival of the fittest because see, like, because it's hard to explain what a free market economy would look like when we only have what we is available to us to look at right now. Because I think in a free market, places like Walmart wouldn't exist. You know, Apple wouldn't exist. It would be much more diverse because part of what makes our market not a free market is copyright laws, which is in the libertarian view prevents innovation because Apple comes up with a phone and they patent it, and it makes it harder for people to make little innovations, and it's hard for people to be creative. And then they get the Apple Store where they pretty much have a monopoly on the apps that are created, and that stifles the market and all that. But
Yeah,
there's tons and tons of experiences, and it's very hard to like have a clear understanding of what it would be like. But basically, the free market just means the government doesn't make laws that interfere with economics.
yeah,
And,
I can see how certain property and intellectual property definitely needs protection. Um, it obviously would be completely different if there was no. See, what I'm getting at is the Libertarian Party at first glance seems like an off switch. Basically, everything is like a free for all. But delving deeper into the details, there is some existence of regulation, but it's very
right,
minimal, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
It's based on um, core concepts of what's the word? Human rights. Just the very, very core fundamental aspects of human rights. That's all that's protected by a government.
Yeah.
Because you could even say like um, your speech is part of your property. So that there would be, it would be really interesting to see how copyright law would develop. But like, look at China, for example. There's no copyright laws there, and they are making a lot of money copying things that we do and reproducing them. That's something that Americans can be doing, but we can't because it's against the law here. And so many things, like, what all these people say, like, oh, like Donald Trump or whoever or Apple, we need to get them to bring those jobs back. They say, like, oh, there's $500 billion overseas that corporations aren't bringing in because they're bad people. No, it's because our system of laws is so stupid, and it's been so polluted by, you know
Expectations that people have. If I may interrupt you,
sure, sure.
uh, that's definitely my biggest gripe with personal liberties, which is one of the reasons I'm very interested in the Libertarian Party, and reading about it, I side with it on 90% probably. But there's these expectations that individuals have from the government and corporations. There's these that we basically look at them as gigantic entities that affect our individual life. And the government, in the role of creating jobs and uh, enable, like, bailing out banks and all these things that happen, that is there's a fine line. The line between government and corporation starts to blur. That confuses me.
Yeah.
It confuses me
Yes.
that it is a problem to begin with. Like, the fact that that problem exists means that a lot of us as individuals have let go control, um, and have these absurd expectations of what people in offices wearing ties should be doing that affect our lives.
Perfectly said. Perfectly. And let me just give you the best example of government and corporations working together. Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court judge, was chief of Monsanto's legal team. Monsanto is that huge GMO agricultural thing.
Yeah, they basically make all of the food in the world now.
Yeah, he's on the Supreme Court, and he sat on a case about Monsanto, and the case was deciding whether farms are allowed to sue Monsanto, and they ruled no, farmers are not allowed to sue Monsanto. And the CEO of Monsanto is head of agriculture in the government. So it's like, what the fuck is going on there? And that's what Bernie supporters don't understand is they want to give more money to the government. They want to put more responsibility in the hands of the government. They're going to destroy all the wealth they get because they just are not as efficient as a private company would be with money or whatever. It's just a corrupt entity. There's no real problem with the concepts of socialism. They're actually, at their core, they're kind of like libertarian concepts because libertarian ultimately is a far left philosophy. But they put way too much trust in the government. They think it's just the corporations that are the bad guys, but really it's the corporations and it's the relationship between the corporations and government.
Yeah, and I mean that has existed for, it's nothing new really. The large corporations that came up, the Rockefellers, Chase, Ford, all these, the emergence of the industrial um, corporations. It's really when they began these massive moves of money and government and laws and infiltration. I guess infiltration or um, mm, I forget the word, but you know what I'm saying. It's been around since the industrial age, when massive companies have the idea that we have to constantly make more profit, and how can we do that? How can we create rules that benefit us and not the other guy selling, the competitor?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Competition. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think and I'm not really mad at those people anymore because I think it's human nature to constantly want to strive to do more and more and more and more. No matter what level you're at, you always want more, and you always want to secure where you're at more and more. We just have to take away the mechanism that allows people to do that, which is government, in my
What's
opinion.
interesting though, I mean, it's hard to make that distinction because a lot of these massive corporations, um, on one side, while are some pretty bad ones out there, on the same rules that they're playing by, we've got some really great corporations that are basically pushing our society and technology and our human advancement into, whatever it is the point. They're making amazing stuff, and it's because they're still playing by the same rules. They beat out the competition, and they now have massive amounts of resources and people and capital to do amazing things. Just look at SpaceX and Elon Musk, and they're all
Hell
playing
yes.
they're all playing by the same rules that these other shitty companies are doing. So I would hate to take that away. Ideally, we would have only amazing companies doing amazing things, but just like people, it seems that you're gonna get a good mixed bag of both. And unfortunately, I don't see an easy way to change that overnight other than us as individuals making decisions, better decisions about ourselves, how we uh, express ourselves, what we choose, not giving up our privacy and our relationships. Because corporations did not get money out of nowhere. Ultimately, if you tie everything together, it comes from people who are struggling, people who are laid back, they don't care, they're having a good life, but as a collective, we're all feeding this machine.
Yeah. Yes. And the main corporations that are at fault, or like the most evil ones, I think are banks. And when you bail out, see, that's the most um, highlighted example of an unfree market is when you can totally fail, and then the government taxes the people to pay to bail you out to the tune of 800 billion. And when Benjamin Bernanke, head of the Federal Reserve at the time, testifies before Congress, and they said, "Where exactly did all that money go?" He says, "I can't tell you." That is an unfree market. That is fascism. I just love saying that. I just love saying
That is fascism.
that. But yeah, so
That is a stupid ass system. Absolutely.
so and with any corporation like Walmart or Target or Best Buy or Facebook, you always have to. I know it's easy for us to say they're exploiting people, but you also have to look at the benefits that they're providing.
Yeah, I mean, Google is a fantastic example, even though it's sometimes hard to think about your privacy and what you're letting them give you for free, or what you're taking for free versus what you're giving up. Google made its billions and possibly it'll be trillion um, off of a simple concept of advertising or ads, right? Just clicking, creating a product that people use. It's a tool, and they made money through ads. But then they also went off and started making an incredible array of things like driving cars, maps, self-driving cars, maps, phones. They expanded because we had this intellectual property laws. I don't know, I forgot where I was going with that, but Google, I like Google.
Yeah, me too. And there are some flaws with Google. They like work with the government and give your, you know, information to the government or whatever the accusations are. But like you said, there is a cost of getting something for free.
Yeah, it's interesting though. We're talking like first of all, I'm astonished that how do you say his name, McAfee or McAfee, right?
McAfee, I think McAfee.
McAfee. He's 70 years old, man. That was crazy. I saw him in the debate, and I'm like, hey, this guy's like in his 50s. He's a
Yeah, it doesn't look 70.
strong-willed man up there, but he's like, I didn't realize he was 70. But the point I was trying to make, a lot of the conversations right now about privacy is all about um, our cybersecurity and our privacy online, or the digital privacy that we're supposed to have. But really, we're a lot of the things that laws, like let's say, for example, you buy a computer, you don't own the operating system. You bought a license to use it. And a lot of these giant contracts, like for iTunes, if you just hit next and you don't even read it, by using this thing that you downloaded for free, you came into an agreement with this massive company. And your information that you're giving them is subject to that contract. And that contract is sort of, what would you say, upheld by the law, the government, if need be, right? The Supreme Court or the courts, the justice system is what will ultimately, deal with any problems in there. So it's funny to me that we're talking about protecting our privacy when it's a digital one, because I still have my privacy in the traditional sense of physical and personal in my body and where I'm residing, right? There's no cameras other than the ones I choose to have, and people only listen to what I choose to say publicly. But all my information, I'd rather not have devices have any of my information. I remember all my passwords, and I don't write them down, and I don't save them on the computer. I just type it all in, but even still, somebody can get access to that. Again, I forgot what point I was trying to make, but I hope that helps.
No, I see what you're saying. The thing is with libertarianism is pretty much you can accept any contract you want, as long as it's voluntary. So there's a important, and that's in the Constitution. There's an important legal case which was about these bakers in like the 50s who were working under tough conditions, like really hard conditions, for like 60 hours or like some crazy number, like 80 hours a week or something like that. And the government came in and said, no, you cannot willfully enter a contract that we consider to be too difficult. So the government
It would infringe on your protection, your self-ownership, and you're like it's saying like you can't enter into a contract that causes harm to the individual yourself. Like he basically wants to protect people from being in harsh conditions and
yes.
unfortunately entering into situations that somebody is benefiting from their suffering or their
Right, right.
whatever.
So in my opinion, I mean, if that's your voluntary choice, then you should be able to do that. You should be able to work any kind of crazy hours and under whatever kind of conditions you want, um, as long as it's voluntary. So, and that's the thing with Google, but the libertarians don't really have a problem with the collecting of information. It's just giving that information to the government, because we don't trust the government. We don't know what the government's going to do with that information. We don't want the government to be able to use that against us, because libertarians typically, they have a different view of, we're considered like terrorists. That word has really been watered down lately, but we're definitely seen as the enemy because we want less federal government and the federal government wants more federal government.
I think though, what you're saying, even if the government does collect our information and what they do, ultimately everything comes down to you don't want to get killed and you don't want to get locked up. And a
Yes.
lot of the laws that exist for all of us are they have no rationale behind them. A lot of it comes from companies or corporations kind of nudging the government to pass a law that people have to abide by to benefit the corporation, like alcohol and marijuana. That's a classic case of the government or legislation being passed to favor one product versus another. Now marijuana is illegal and it could get you locked up in jail. I mean, it's been like that for. Hopefully, it changes, but that's where I think the biggest the source of all these problems is really like the laws that we have and where their silly origins come from, because personal liberties, what you choose to do in your own privacy and your own life, should not affect anybody else. I mean, that's one of the major principles about libertarianism, right?
Yes.
accept responsibility for the consequences of the choices you make, and only you get to make your choices. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because it'd be chaos if everybody's running around doing whatever they want. But like, I'm not hurting you, but you're just like, dude, put some clothes on, man.
So, okay, so another thing that libertarians believe in is the invisible hand concept, which is okay, so let's say, Henry, you're like, hey, we're in a libertarian society now. Freaking Adam got elected president and he fucking totally destroyed all the government. Now I can do whatever I want. I'm going to walk around naked. Even though you're free to do that, you're going to be shunned by society. You know, you're not going to be able to get a job as a naked person. You're not going to be able to do this or do that or whatever. And so the invisible hand will, in effect, dress you and make you, um, you know, it will force you to make the decisions that are in your best interests.
That's interesting. So it's really rather than having laws that would persecute somebody doing something silly like that and put them in jail, instead we're really saying that our society and culture as a collective would be the that invisible hand that determines this is a dumb person. Um, Stop doing that. But what if they choose not to stop? What if they choose to continue? It's just going to be a problem, right? It's just going to be like, oh, there's the naked guy again. Jesus Christ, like he's still waving his dick around the street. Um, we do have to have some semblance of, because certain minor situations, things get annoying sometimes. In our personal lives, like if we have a neighbor that's too loud, or you know, I can't think of another example other than the naked guy or a loud neighbor at the moment, or somebody leaves their trash out. Little things like that. We do need to enforce them. We have to have some protection where we can have somebody come up and be like, enough's enough. Get that bag out of the doorway where everybody's walking and put it where it needs to go. Right? There's a lot of people out there that would take advantage of more freedoms and less consequences in terms of government locking you up or fining you or does that make sense? It's hard for me to get
Oh,
a grasp.
definitely. No, it definitely does. It definitely does. And I'm gonna say I'm gonna make an unfair answer, and then I'll make a better answer next. Unfair answer is I think that we've been conditioned, or like because of the way our government is, the way it's been for so long, that we've created people like that who don't want to do the obvious things that are just going to be better for everybody in their community. Unfair answer. The better answer is um, you can use property rights to prosecute certain actions like that. Like, see, and here's the cool part about libertarianism. Here's where you really get some power as an individual, as a libertarian in a libertarian society. Let's say somebody's playing the music too loud. They're interfering with your personal enjoyment of your private property. That is a just grievance to bring against somebody. Let's say a factory gets built down the street from you and is polluting the air. They are I just lost the word, but they're infringing on your ability to enjoy your personal property because they're or even causing health problems for you, do no harm. That's a actionable offense. Or if they're polluting water and the water passes through your part of the river where your house is, you can sue the freaking waste disposal plant or whatever. And that would give people power over certain corporations that pollute and do stuff like that, and people who play the music too loud. But obviously it is limited, so there still would be problems with, like, okay, you can't really get this guy to tie up his trash bag, but maybe there's other ways to solve that problem without having to bring like the police into it and stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's just you gave an example too of a corporation polluting your water. Um, we do at that point it basically does say, that scenario alone basically says that we need a government entity in order to control what this corporation in this supposedly free market is doing to our environment and our personal, our bodies, if they're attacking our harming us or infringing on our rights as individuals. Then we need the government to be like, hey, company, don't do that. Or
Right, right. Which can be done by a state government, or here's where it gets really radical with libertarianism,
oh boy.
and it comes to all that. But here, okay, so before I say the super radical thing, um, in our world, 2016 America, if Ron Paul got elected president, none of this would ever happen. This is because Ron Paul is a constitutional libertarian, which is the most, which is the least radical of all libertarian theories.
So what is a constitutional libertarian?
A constitutional libertarian is somebody who just says, "Let's go back to the Constitution." Because when you take con law, like I did in law school, every single case that happens after the Constitution has been written is expanding the power of the government by violating the Constitution. They come up with justifications to violate the Constitution. So if we went back to what the Constitution actually says in its first, rendition, we'd have a very libertarian society. Libertarian enough to undo a lot of the bad stuff that we're doing now. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's basically going by the book, and the Constitution is the right to life, liberty, and property. It's very simple. But
Exactly.
a lot of times we're presented with scenarios that it's hard to interpret, and it's hard to apply something that was written so long ago to a life with things that are occurring now, especially in technology and medicine, that really is a gray area. And being black and white about certain issues is impossible, I think. I think something like cloning humans or creating technology that will take us into space but destroys the planet, what that's not in the Constitution, so it's hard to really get to that simplicity, I think. But
Yes.
I like where you're going, or where not you, because you created this. I like the idea of states dealing with sort of those minor issues, like the company that rolls in and starts blanketing the skies with fog. The state should tell them to get the hell out, and
Yes.
and the police force should be, and that's interesting though. I don't think I like the police force being different in every state because isn't that what we have now? And sometimes it's kind of confusing when you go to a different state and you're like, so I can't pee on the street.
Yes, that would see that's you just hit the nail on the head for like one of the main arguments against libertarianism, against Confederacy type thinking, and this is like kind of why the Articles of Confederation failed, which is what they had before they wrote the Constitution. So like they during a convention, they were going to modify the Articles of Confederation, but they just said, "Screw it, we're going to erase the whole thing and write a constitution." Because what they're saying is there's not enough uniformity. It's not efficient enough. Everything is so different from each state. It takes so much work to learn everything. Everybody had a different like monetary system. Everybody had different laws and all this stuff. So nationalizing and having a federal law is much more efficient. It's much more streamlined. But I would argue it's at the cost of humanity that we streamline these things. But like you were
Definitely,
saying,
the federal laws are such a hodgepodge of things that have happened in one place, but applies to everybody now because of that
right.
one circumstance. That definitely, I like the idea of reducing federal law to a simple set of rules that everybody's like pretty clear on. You
Yeah,
know.
like Ten Commandments type stuff or something, something really
Oh, now you're
simple.
getting the religious people all hyped up.
But you know what I mean. Just like one sentence rules. These are the rules. Just don't do those. Don't be a dick. Number one. But you know what I mean. Just like simplify the whole system.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I think that's all pretty awesome because I'm a person that likes to focus on minimal principles. I'm not talking about principles as like moral principles, but just anything in life. Just keep it simple, keep it essential, and the more convoluted hodgepodge you get, the worse it's going to snowball into more problems in the future. And I think that's where we're at. The snowball is massive at this
Oh
point.
yeah. Oh yeah. And I don't want. I think I didn't answer your question when you were talking about like how the constitution, how society changes, so we don't know. We don't know how the Constitution would apply to current technology and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The funny thing about that is that the Constitution itself is just a series of limitations on what the government can do. And one of the biggest things in libertarian circles that we talk about is that it's hard for us to even imagine how we would handle certain things without the government. Because when we think of America, we think of like Obama, and we think of the White House, and we think of the Lincoln Monument, and Washington D.C., and the Army, and all that. That's all the government. The first exercise that we have to do when we're trying to talk to people about libertarianism is get people to believe that we can make decisions and do good stuff better than the government can. So it's like when you think, oh, how are we going to deal with like advancing technology if the Constitution is so archaic? Well, the answer is we don't. Doesn't matter what the government thinks. It's just a matter of how we're going to handle it on local levels. Do you want SpaceX technology in Georgia? Everybody votes no. We're not going to do it. You know. But
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying now. That makes sense, and that's probably a lot of what people don't understand about the Constitution that I sure didn't. And that you put it in a good way. A clear perspective is that it's mostly just rules limiting the government or setting rules for the government. It has nothing to do with the people.
right.
The only thing to do with the people was life, liberty, and property. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting though. I think a lot of the problems we have and a lot of the laws that have come to pass is really caused by fear and people being concerned with their way of life being affected by somebody else's way of life, particular to personal freedoms. Like I know, obviously, abortion is a huge issue. People put their religious perspectives onto somebody else's life, and that they get to decide what you can and can't do. Um, Equal rights for marriage that finally got fixed after so long. That do you get what I'm saying? It's like people are scared of their way of life being affected by weird stuff that they don't agree with. So
Yeah. Exactly, dude. Like
what
we
am I
can
going to tell my kids when they see two guys kissing on the TV? You tell them sometimes guys kiss and girls kiss each other. Okay, it just happens. I think there's a lot of people that are scared of the unknown or things that they're not a part of, and that's why we have a lot of silly debates going around. A lot of laws that affect me that I had nothing to do with and I don't care about. Some people like us don't care what other people do as long as we're fine and happy and dandy. A lot of other people are mad about their situation, so they want to blame it on somebody else. They want to say my bakery's not doing well because this guy is making cupcakes. We should do something. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, man. It's mass confusion out there, dude.
I
Mass
love
mass
I
confusion.
I love individuals. I think us, the people as individuals, we sit down with them, even a small group, everybody's fantastic. They have a great side to them and they have a negative side to them. And we can all learn from each other. But as a collective of millions of people screaming into the internet, I don't believe in us. I think, thank goodness that we have some. I think we're in a good position. Maybe the way things right now, obviously, it's problematic, and you're seeing now the politics sort of turning into this reality TV show that just kind of the pendulum has swung to completely one side, and everything's kind of a mess right now. But fortunately, I think we have that because a lot of other assholes are out there, and we don't have to deal with them on a regular basis because of all this stuff that we already have in place, these laws. So I'm on the fence. I can't make up my mind really on what I would rather have in
What do you
terms of
mean?
this, like the libertarian platform totally, or what we have now. What we have now is stupid. Obviously, it has very big, um, I don't
Problems. Sure.
know, yeah, problems. I was
Okay.
trying.
Yeah, no, excuse me. So yes,
Oh.
and you bring up another good criticism of libertarianism is that ultimately libertarians kind of believe everybody's good. That's why I don't know if I think I might have asked you this early on, but a question I like to ask people is, do you think people are intrinsically good or bad at birth? And depending on what they say is going to influence what they think politically. Because there's this writer Thomas Hobbes who is the opposite of like John Stuart Mill and John Locke in the political philosophy realm. When he
Hmm.
says without government, life is nasty, brutish, and short. If there's no government, everyone's just gonna start raping and killing and just mayhem. The only thing that keeps us in order is the whip, and the billy club and the gun. So and there's the go ahead.
Scaring us basically. Fear is what keeps us all in order because you can't trust everybody to be good. Interesting though, it makes me think a lot of these tribes that are still in existence, a lot of more primitive lifestyles and cultures out there, even they have their own set of rules and governance, but mostly it's when we investigate them, when we send National Geographic and the cameras to go see them, we really talk about this is their culture. This is just what they do. They mark themselves based on hunts that they've done. That's just their culture. But in a way, that's their government. And when we're looking at us, we're looking at society, and culture is something completely separate from government. Government's this entity right now, this massive entity that's solving problems, and the economy's a mess. And again, I forgot what point I was trying to make, but we all always, whether it's a big ass country or a small tribe, we do have these little nudges at this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, and this is how we handle lunatics.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
whoa.
whoa.
I hear my
I hear
voice
my
all of a
voice
sudden.
all of a sudden. I hear you just fine.
Oh, let
Oh,
me just.
let me just.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Oh, um, there's def like there's definitely a natural element. There's something about human nature that requires some kind of governance. It's just the decision though to put other people in charge of governing you that are far away and you don't know them. They have nothing to do with your particular area and your particular culture. That's like where the debate comes in with libertarianism is because really when you think of government, it has more than one meaning than just Washington D.C. I govern my speech, you govern your diet, you govern yourself on how you treat other people. So there's definitely that, but to put it in the simplest terms, is we want government to be organic. Does that make sense? Like
I
if
s-
you if you think of the organic debate versus like the GMO debate, it's very similar. We want governance to occur naturally from a community and not like having a bunch of people be born into a system that's 100 years old that is not necessarily moral.
Well, that's kind of what happened, right? When the nation was founded and the Constitution was written, that was as organic as it gets, but it has just by human nature evolved into this monster that we have now, this big confusing mess. I mean, that was the experiment of the United States that we're currently still in. But do you see that something could have gone a little better in the founding of the country that would have prevented where we are now? Just to a little better direction, a little bit more, kept it organic.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Um, Actually, um, the Constitution was the first time anyone ever forced legislation upon America. The people really didn't want a constitution. They didn't want to nationalize. They ran away from England because of nationalism. You know, they pretty much ratified and forced states to ratify the Constitution in a very secretive and a very rushed way. So
Mhm.
actually, the Constitution itself isn't a very libertarian document in the purest form of libertarianism because it gives up states' rights to a national entity. So a lot of in more deep libertarian circles, we're against the Constitution. But just for practical purposes, today in 2016, at least if we're going towards the Constitution, it's the right way. But that's still not the purest example of libertarianism. So, I know this sounds crazy, but the death knell for America was the Constitution.
The what?
The
What did
death
you call it?
the death knell, Knell. I don't know how to say it, but
What
the
is that?
that just means like the kiss of death or the beginning of the end. Uh,
The beginning of the end was in the beginning.
was in the beginning, yes. So we're talking about organic growth. And, well, that happened because a lot of people, like Alexander Hamilton, was a British nationalist. A lot of the people who came from Great Britain didn't want to start a new country. They just wanted to expand Britain's power, Britain's reach. Um, you know, um, uh,
People just got
so
annoyed by being taxed without representation, and they're like, "That's it. We've had enough. You do your own thing. We'll do our own thing over here."
right, because back then, an ocean away from another land is
This is
is
like being on another
outrageous.
planet.
Yeah, we're not gonna have some guy tell us, what to do a million miles away from us.
Yeah,
But
the whole idea of governance and the history of all these different experiments that we've had, it's kind of it's weird. It's always changing. It's always evolving, and a lot of I know I don't want to sound like a crazy because I'm perfectly fine with the way things are working right now, but it's funny that it's set in stone, like the Constitution. It's like that's it. Like us as human beings, we're always revising ourselves and what we do and how we say things and how we act based on experiments that we do. Go out, say something, that was the wrong thing to say, I'll never say that again, and I'm going to be nicer to people, blah, 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 blah. Government is like this, the source is the Constitution, and you can't change that. And it's interesting to hear that some side of the Libertarian Party does go and say, let's change it, or that's not it, that's not the truth. I wonder what happens, when we go to Mars and establish colonies. Is the revolution going to happen all over again, or are they going to be like no taxation without representation, and we're like, this is going to be the United States of Mars, not of America? Are they going to, at some point, we're going to create a new system, whether it's here on this planet or on another planet. It's interesting to think that these words that everybody throws around that it's hard to get a grasp on them. Libertarian, socialism, whatever. We're gonna make a new one soon. Whether it's maybe on Mars, I'll roll over there.
yeah, that would be awesome. Well, okay, so
Sorry
so
for the rant.
it's all good. The you're talking about a really good point because it's really really slippery. all this political stuff. So let me propose a new way to think about politics, which I think is becoming more and more meaningful as we get more and more into unique political situations. Is do you think, or where do you strike the balance between authority and liberty? In what cases do you think people should not have the option to make a choice, um, versus where do you think people should have the option to make a choice? So that extends to a lot of different things like the courts.
Nope, you're muted. Um, interesting. I'm just talking because you're muted, but I would say one of the biggest things, one of the most important things, would be to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I mean, I'm not sure I'm following the question perfectly.
Yeah, I got a phone call and it cut me off.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries. I
what was the
kept
last thing you heard there?
ask me the question, Ann, because I'm having a hard time understanding it. About where do we set limits for authority? Really, is that what it
Yeah,
was?
yeah. Where? Okay, and I was going to give you examples, which are like the court system. Do you think that the government definitely has to have a hand on that, or do you think the public, that space can be taken by private individuals, have private court systems? That applies to the police, that applies to education, that applies to the construction of roads, all these public services that you can think of. Which ones do you think the government needs to be doing, and which ones do you think that the people in that community can do without government? That's where I was going to say before. That's the real radical. That's the true radical essence of libertarianism, is that the radical libertarian believes that we don't need federal government doing the police. We don't need them doing the roads. We don't need them doing education, because the people will do what's in their best interest without the government and build the roads that are necessary, police the people properly, and educate the people properly, because that invisible hand thing, it's in everybody's best interest to have all these entities working efficiently. Which
Yeah.
so that's a
You know,
very
that's kind of what we do now. I mean, I know, a lot of people I work with, they're part of committees. They're the board of planning for the city of whatever. They're involved, and individuals that you wouldn't expect are in board member meetings, and they're deciding for their city or their neighborhood, and we're also electing, the sheriff. Yeah, I see elections coming around for the sheriff of whatever county. Make sure you elect this guy, not that guy. Who's voting for all this stuff, and who's really? I mean, that's us. So we're dealing with little things. The big issue is really funding projects, and that's where money comes in. That's where government is sort of the tally keeper and distributor of assets. Uh, let's say a state needs to build a certain road, but by the tax alone, they don't have that enough money, so they're not going to get that road built, but they need to in order to connect to another state. Just ideas like that, like infrastructure. That is a whole. The nation is connected through this infrastructure. We can't have a state that has no internet. But fortunately, through some kind of magic that happened between government, state, and regular people and corporations, it happened. Everybody has internet, supposedly. Does that make sense? That
Yeah, no, totally. And it's just the libertarian view that people could accomplish those same things, just with equal amount of with equal amount of success or more success than the government can. Because we think whenever you put money through the government system, because if you think of the government as a middleman, like we all live, some town, some neighborhood in Orlando, and there's no roads there. Um, Certainly, the owner of that apartment building wants roads, because if he doesn't have roads, then no one is going to be able to rent out his property. Um, do you think that that property owner is going to do a better job at building those roads, or do you think like the government's going to do a better job at building those roads? That might not be the best example, but the libertarian would
well,
would
we
say like
kind
the
of have
private.
the example already. Our infrastructure that the government has managed is that doesn't have good reviews. It's basically
Yeah.
the two-star infrastructure at this point. I hear that a lot. I personally have never experienced it myself. Like I see and I go places, I drive to places, and it's like, okay, there's a road. Sometimes there's traffic, and because this was poorly designed and we're increasing population, like I kind of understand why shit happens. Um, but a lot of people have sort of a disdain for the infrastructure that we have in this country, and that's because the second scenario you said is what we have in place now. I'm open to trying a different method, but getting everybody organized to do that would be kind of difficult. How would you think you would go about it?
I think it would happen naturally based on the interests of everybody involved. So like, any if you're gonna build, if you're these super rich, super elite guys, and you're gonna build a huge building, you're gonna make an investment in Chicago, you know, to put your building there and rent out office space. You also have an interest to make sure people can get to the building. So I think infrastructure and stuff like that is gonna just spontaneously happen, and that's the worst part of libertarianism. This is the weakest part of libertarianism because we don't actually have answers. All we can say is what's happening now is definitely wrong. And before you take that as the reason why you don't want to be a libertarian, think of this example. When we had slavery, no, part of the reason why nobody wanted to get rid of it is because we had no idea what was going to happen when all that slave labor suddenly disappeared. We didn't know people didn't know what was going to happen to the market. People didn't know what's going to happen to the financial structure that America was working on at the time. And they said, it's they're too afraid. And anybody who wanted to abolish it, they're just like, well, what are we going to do after that? Nobody could have predicted that we're going to have machines a few years later that can do that work 100 times easier. So all we can say is we have to stop doing immoral things. And what happens after that, we're not sure. But hopefully it'll take care of itself. That's the
I like that. Let's say, just for example, this election, a libertarian candidate got elected and became the president of the United States. I think they would be presented with that same issue. They couldn't just all of a sudden turn everything on its side and be like everything's gone. They'd probably be presented with all this like, oh shit, I can't take this away because it's connected to this essential piece of society that everybody depends on. So let's focus on the little stuff. Like start working at it slowly. Laws, drug laws. That's probably an easy one. Um,
right. War.
but they'd be like, but then the state police, they're gonna start laying people off because there's not enough arrests going on. Uh-oh. Now I got to create jobs somewhere else. Where am I going to create jobs? Or is the government responsible for creating jobs? I don't think so. I don't think the
Right.
government is making jobs. But these are issues that people will be presented with if we're going to follow a libertarian principle. Which to me, I like the idea mostly for the personal liberties. I think we really need to stop incarcerating people. I mean, that's my only gripe with what's happening now and the environment. And we're really all causing a lot of it as individuals. You might not know it, but you buying an iPhone just has massive consequences for the environment. Something like a Prius, where it's great, you're not spending using any fossil fuels, but the devastation that occurred mining all the minerals and all the raw material to create these batteries. Just because it didn't happen in your country doesn't mean it happened somewhere else, and that other place is fucked. Just like iPhones mining these, what do they call them? Rare earth metals. Is
Yeah.
that what
I think
know?
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
so as individuals, our rights are being infringed on in terms of how we make our own decisions about our personal lives, our personal choices. But also, we're perpetuating a lot of the stuff that we get mad about later, like what things you buy, what companies you enable, what things you don't enable, what things you're failing to support. Support I don't know. It doesn't.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I know this is going to sound more pretty fanciful, but um, if we had a libertarian society, people wouldn't need to resort to things like Walmart, because ultimately what Walmart provides is the cheapest of the cheap possible. But if we're in a flourishing society, that need doesn't really exist anymore. You know, if you're in a society where everybody's making like 30,000 a year, every single person minimum on average. I don't know what the average is now, or whatever the average is now. Let's say it's triple that. Which is possible. What we don't realize, and what people don't realize, who like, oh, I don't pay attention to government. I don't pay attention. It doesn't affect me. It most certainly affects you. It affects you on so many levels that are almost impossible to comprehend. It's outrageous because, like, just that simple thing of getting off the gold standard has reduced the value of the dollar almost 90%. Like that, all that, oh, you could see a movie for a dime and all that. That's still possible. That's possible. Not that much has changed to make a dime, not to make a movie be $12 opposed to $1 or less than $1. It's because of inflation. Most of that price increase is the result of bad economic policy. So I think it's very hard for us to see what the financial structure of America could be like if we had not made the mistakes we've made in the past. And I forgot what we were talking about. I just went on saying that. I don't know if that applied to anything you were saying.
It does. I mean, like I said, a lot of our individual choices perpetuate certain problems that you wouldn't think are connected. And a lot of what we're dealing with now is a consequence of something somebody came up with 50 years ago. We're
Right.
seeing the end result of some stupid ass decision. What is interesting, though, and I think the libertarian principles or the party, what they might like is something like Bitcoin, where it's decentralized value. I know that we talk about currency and we talk about money as if you know comes from somewhere, but like you said, at this point, it's not the gold standard anymore. It's just like value of stuff. We're pulling it out of thin air. It just is the way it is. A lot of people get stuck in that philosophy of this is just the way we've been doing things. So why are you changing it? But getting to a principle of something like Bitcoin, it's decentralized value. I don't want to use the word currency or money because already people are thinking of dollars. And dollars to me is confusing. I don't know where that comes from, why prices changed, um, why some people are high value versus the work of others. All that stuff is confusing. But something like Bitcoin makes sense, even though it is doing too well. I don't know.
No, yeah, it's definitely it's okay. So let's just talk about money and currency and value, what it all represents. One of the biggest contributions um, in philosophy, in economic philosophy, political theory that was contributed by libertarian thinkers, namely Ludwig. Well, actually, it wasn't. The main guy is Ludwig von Mises, but I think it was this guy Charles Menger or something who came up with this idea of the subjective theory of value. So,
What?
the subjective theory of value. So,
Okay.
so the way we typically think of things, like, okay, like the movie theater ticket is $12. That's how valuable it is. It's worth $12. That's the old way of thinking about it. The libertarian way of thinking about it, or okay, so we're going into, see, libertarian has nothing to do with economics. All it has anything to do with is how the government runs. It's purely a political theory. But
Yeah, but hold on though, isn't one of the main things that happened that was a positive change from the 13 colonies turning into the United States is all this chaos of currency that everybody just had to relearn shit. I mean, we have that already. If we go to different countries, you're like, okay, I got to convert my money now. But at a certain scale and on a state scale, you're gonna get confused without some sort of governance on standards, right?
Yes, yes, and what I would say to that is over time the states would realize that it's better, it's for in their best interest to have be using all the same kind of currency system. So that's my quick dirty answer to that. But just to
I'm
finish
satisfied.
it.
You're saying I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
Sure, sure. Um, um, okay,
Shit.
so libertarianism itself has nothing to do with economics, but anybody who's a libertarian is most likely an Austrian economic theorist. So there's this other school of thought called Austrian economics, which is very, pretty similar to free market capitalism, but they have some subtle differences. This theory, the subjective theory of value, being the most critical one of those distinctions, and which is that the value of something is totally dependent on the person who's willing to buy it. There's no a lot of value is subjective. Nothing really has an objective theory, objective value. So, like gold, for example, why has so many countries accepted gold to be their um, currency? It's because their gold has certain qualities that are most commonly desirable as a form of exchanging value amongst people. It was light, it was easily, it melted at a low point, so it was easily craftable, whatever. It had all these kind of certain
Super
traits as,
stable. It's stable, right? It doesn't get messed up by the environment easily. It's a very,
yeah,
but and really, it's funny. I always get down to to try to understand where we are now. I always try to understand the origins of these ideas, and really, it all came from counting, right? It's just how much grain do we have, and I'll give you this paper that says you have this much grain, so you don't have to carry it all around with you and trade it. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Or,
and
or, or
that's
if like if you grew corn and you wanted to buy shoes, but nobody who was selling shoes wanted corn, how are you going to get shoes? There has to be some intermediary thing that carries value that both parties want.
yeah. And according to libertarianism, right? Is that a thing? Libertarianism?
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay. It just sounded silly to me. I thought I made up a word. I'm not having one of my best days right now.
No, you're doing great, dude. You're doing
I went a
great.
little crazy last night with the intoxication of my own personal liberty.
That is your choice.
With my own body, now I'm suffering the consequences. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get back to what libertarian, how it would not govern money. Then it has nothing to do with it. Doesn't touch it, but it sets a standard at least.
Right, right. It's because, money was created without government in the first place. It wasn't until government came along that money got destroyed. The value has been destroyed. But yeah, pretty much I mean, I think it pretty much says in the Constitution, I forget where, but it says that the government should not be a part of commerce. It says except for like the general welfare of the nation. So, you know, lawyers really harped on that language and found a way to wiggle the government into commerce. But um, yeah, so the government shouldn't have any role. Bitcoin is a totally self-sufficient economic system.
So let me ask you this: how many people would you say, are libertarian, are part of the party or side with it, and are actively, registered? I guess if that's a thing.
I would say a pretty slim minority. I would say like, definitely less than 5% of the population. Um, yeah, I think we're pretty much a minority, but it's my belief that if people knew what libertarianism was, then more people would be a libertarian. but just because of the nature of our political system, these ideas aren't able to be heard.
And now we have podcasts, though. I mean, it's really the nature of how you present something and how it is portrayed by the people who believe in it is this it would determines the success of it or not. And I was just thinking that it'd be interesting if people that are libertarian leading by example and doing something like using Bitcoin amongst each other. I don't know, but it seems that like if you're gonna want to create a new or a better way of doing things, then you have to start adopting them in your own personal life first and
Oh
then
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's a success.
there's definitely a very dedicated community there. There's like a few random people. Like I think Vince Vaughn is a libertarian. Um,
Vince Vaughn.
yeah, Vince Vaughn. He used to like do speeches for Ron Paul when he was campaigning. Um, he endorsed Ron Paul. There's a couple other like people out there. Um, I think pretty much Elon Musk is a libertarian. Um, Whatever. But you're right. But you see, like it's hard to reach people. Like because when you think of Bitcoin, you think of like this weird offshoot, like kind of weird computer hacker type community. And when you
Sweaty,
think
sweaty butt crack fat guy on the computer in a dark room in his mom's basement shading Magic the Gathering cards.
very specific. But you see, all of that comes from the mainstream media. All of these associating words with certain ideas, associating things with negative ideas. That's all, what I would call social fascism. And that's the main dude, like, okay, so put yourself like just imagine like you're in a football stadium and everyone's fighting and attacking each other, and some people are successful, but they cordoned off a certain section of the stadium where you can't get to, and if you try they'll shoot you, and there's these gang members that are policing the area and doing all this crazy stuff. You just chaos all around you, and out of the corner of your eye you see something, and you see the escape hatch. You see, all you have to do is press this button, and all the doors in the football stadium are going to open up, and everyone's going to be able to expand and be free from this crazy little society. But everybody in the stadium tells you not to press the button because somebody told them that something really bad is going to happen if you press the button. Imagine how desperate you would feel if you could save everybody in that stadium if you just press the button, but nobody would believe you that that's the right solution.
What
That's
a metaphor, my God. Fantastic metaphor. Um, okay, I think I'm following it, and you're basically attributing that to how you feel as a libertarian and trying to convince the population that they need to be fixed, our situation needs to be mended, but we have to get them to listen and they're not listening, right? I mean, that's essentially the clip
yes,
of
yes,
the stadium metaphor by Adam.
right. And they're not listening because they're intrinsically dumb or whatever or evil or bad. It's just because
Distracted.
people.
You're not focused on. We're all trying to be cool. I think as an individual, we're trying to be successful. We're trying to be cool people. And we're trying to be liked, and we're trying to not have to worry about struggles and having food, shelter, and water. Fundamentally, that's the big thing. And a lot of people are distracted trying to get that, like the basic fundamental essentials, rather. Um, what was I gonna say? I forgot. But still, like it's one thing to say like let's get the attention. Like why is it so hard? Like the media is always to blame, right? The media is this unfair bully that only shows what makes the most money. Obviously,
Yeah,
let's dry. But something like the Libertarian Party, and I like it. I want to be a part of it. But rather than kind of signing up and saying that I am one, I'll just sort of live my life through the principles or the as best I can, reflecting what that party um show or just says, whatever. That's the best I could do. I mean, making something popular, making something cool is really about giving other people the opportunity to experience it without being told to experience it. Discovering it for themselves is one of the best ways to have somebody believe in an idea, is if they discover it themselves. And you do so by enabling that, by leading by example, by me and you having a discussion on a podcast and sharing it with people and being like, hey, this is fun, it's entertaining, but you also learn something, and we're not here to preach anything. We're just here to be like, hey, we will not have men waving their dicks around in the street, but you won't have lead in your water either. I don't know. See where I'm going with that, or
Oh,
is it?
absolutely, dude. And that's why there's a burden on me as somebody who carries the flag of libertarianism. I have to be very careful with what I say and how I present it, and I have to make sure I have all the facts. So when I present libertarianism, somebody just says, "Oh, well, what's going to happen with the government? It's just going to go into chaos." And if I don't have an answer, then that's what they're going to believe, and they're going to go on their merry way. That's why I put more pressure on myself to be as correct as I possibly can, I guess.
I see. With like sort of having rebuttals with people's outlandish claims that something just doesn't work. What is that? Like not understanding the concept fully. They're going to come up with weird,
Right.
fantastic
And,
stories.
and the great thing about being like a counterculture is you hear the same criticisms over and over and over and over. So I've been at this for 8 years, and like that's why every time you said something, I have a detailed, elaborate thing to respond, a way to respond to you because I said it a million freaking times to people, because it's always the same. And not with you, I think you had much better questions, but like especially dealing with somebody who's only ever watched CNN or only ever watched Fox News, I know exactly what they're going to say, when they're going to say it, so I have the best rebuttals possible for them. Like, and it's funny, dude. One time, like on Jon Stewart's show, he made a skit about libertarianism that they're childish. Like, if you're a libertarian, you still believe in childish things, which is based on someone who said that libertarianism is basically what you learn as a kid. You learn don't hit people, don't take things that aren't yours. Those are like the basic principles of libertarianism, and Jon Stewart took that and made that joke. Ever since then, I've had so many people say, "Oh, you're still in your adolescent phase," you know. All of a sudden, this new criticism came out of nowhere just because Jon Stewart said it. So it's the
Yeah,
bench when
that's so unfortunate, man.
yeah.
There's definitely a popular culture uh, with this group, right? Like there's this idea that you need to be a certain kind of person once you reach a certain kind of age. Um,
Yeah.
and it's prevalent in media, it's prevalent in just our social circles, it's prevalent in the office. Everybody's kind of clapping like, yeah, you moved up, congratulations. It's outlandish to say, hey, listen, I like where I'm at right now, I really don't need to move up. Like, is it cool if I just keep doing what I'm doing? They're like, well, you don't want to move up the ladder? I don't see a ceiling for you. He's like, no, 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 it's too much work. Chill. I'm happy where I am. Everybody's like, are you getting married? Are you having kids? Are you getting a house? All this stuff, these ideas that people have about who and what should be, is silly. But there's cool ass people out there like McAfee. That guy's 7 years old, um, rocking his balls off in his car, driving around with Benzos or Xanax.
Yo, how funny would
running
it
away
be?
from running away from being a person of interest for a murder. Like, that guy's life is in one paragraph enough that people would be like, Jesus Christ. But as an interesting man, he's successful. He created his business, and now he's in the forefront. Well, what I would say is the forefront because I saw that debate as a libertarian. I would like for that guy to be president because people are going to judge though. Like, they're going to think, oh well, he does drugs. He's a loser. Uh, no, obviously not. He's a successful businessman. Are you peeing?
No, I just turn on this thing for no apparent reason.
Dare
Um,
you?
what do you think of? Okay, so the last thing I'll ask you about libertarianism, and then we can end this. We've been going at it for a while. Um, so there's a big debate. Um, about whether or not you're allowed to discriminate against people. So they said in the debate, like, oh, like, would you make it legal for the government to, or would you make it legal for people to discriminate based on like sex or sexuality?
Oh,
Like,
this is the cake debate.
this was in the debate.
No, the great cake debate.
Yes, yes,
I
yes,
was hoping we could talk about that. I like that scenario. It's very interesting.
yeah. So
Uh,
like,
it's just I don't know it very well, but sorry, I don't keep interrupting.
no,
I
no,
gotta.
no, no. I could. I'm a windbag. I can interrupt me when you need to. But just in general, that debate is strict libertarianism would say you're not allowed to prevent somebody, or you're not allowed to tell a private company to not that they have to sell to somebody they don't want to. But Gary Johnson, he's a libertarian, and he said no. I think that's wrong because if everybody in the town is racist, then the black family won't be able to survive. So where do you stand on that? Whether or not private companies should be
That's
able to
a
discriminate.
that's a difficult scenario. The one of the minority family in an all white racist place not being able to survive. That's fucked up.
That is fucked up. That is fucked up. And
I
and and, and I don't know if that would ever actually really exist, but that's
could
pretty.
it
That's
could. There's definitely I've seen documentaries of like on Vice or something where they go to a super racist all white state. I saw Oprah went to a city or a county that was all white racist white supremacists, and she's just in there talking like, so why do you hate black people? And they're like, we just don't want them here. I'm like, oh my god. um, but in the cake scenario, I think they should be able to decide who they sell to. I don't think the government should say anything about that. Look, it's unfortunate. We don't want to do that. Okay, it's obviously discriminating, and it's obviously driven by this religious idea of gay marriage being, against God. But they have a right to be like, you know what? I don't want to make a goddamn cake anymore. I would say to go far if they really believed in it, just shut down the whole shop and be like, fuck it, we're done. You know?
yeah.
But they don't have to. You can't force somebody to make something and sell it. I don't think.
That's it. I totally agree. And especially now, given the current technology, it's a lot more rare, I think, for them to not be able to get a cake. If and that's the thing too. Like
They were
if
probably looking for that too. I read that they were
oh
going
yeah,
around, and you know what? That happened for whatever reason, but ultimately, if it exists where if a company or doesn't want to sell you something because of whatever they discriminate about, they're just a shitty company, and the market would decide, be like, no, fuck them. We do that.
exactly.
We do that all the time. It's so much easier now with social media. You post one thing about Twitter, it goes viral. That company's going to submit an apology in a couple of minutes.
That's hell yeah. Now more than ever, it's the best time for libertarianism because all that exists. And in the situation of the black family living in an all white neighborhood, if I was president and I was doing libertarian stuff, I would the only social like welfare program I would have would be to help people move out of situations like that. You have like a one-time voucher and the government's going to help you move to an area that you think suits you best. So if libertarianism starts happening and you get stuck in a weird place, we're going to move you to a more liberal place or a more racist place, wherever you want to be. Only if there's like serious undue hardship because of
Yeah.
the change of the laws.
But you know what? A lot of the serious unjust hardship is caused by laws. So some people are always fucked by.
Exactly.
So it would kind of feed itself in a way. You would get less and less of those situations where people are stuck.
Right. Right. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing with libertarianism is it doesn't mean everybody's going to be a winner, but it's a better model than we have now. There's no situation where everybody's going to be able to be successful. Everybody's going to have a great life. That's just not the nature of life.
And
You
it's
know,
also not the responsibility of everybody. It really is up to you and cultivating your relationships with people because
right.
ultimately we help each other on a smaller scale. Family and friends is like the most important thing. And if you don't have a great family life, then you got to find the best friends you could possibly have. Vice versa, you know? So I would never look for help other than first my family and friends and get out of shitty situations through them with their help. And do the same for those around me, which is a principle that a lot of people don't share. Helping others and those around them. There's this idea of scarcity and competition that we, as a capitalist consumer society, just perpetuate. We keep doing it.
See, I'm just gonna be a stickler here. We're totally not in a capitalist society. We're maybe in the definition of capitalism where people think money is the only important thing, capitalism, where you only care about capital. But we're definitely not in a free market system. We haven't been for 100 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's what.
I was definitely using it in the term of money is the most important thing about life.
Right, right. And that's just where things, subtle things like that, get people confused.
Gotcha.
But yeah, whatever. And I guess we can end it there. I think you did a fantastic job. Thank
Well,
you
thank
for.
you for having me, sir.
Yes, you're an excellent guest as always. What do you do? I know. I was saying I was going to baptize you and force you to be a libertarian and stuff like that. But I'm glad we had this discussion. And obviously, you choose to do whatever you want to do. And
I'm for it. I'm down. I mean, at some point I'll register and I'll be like, yeah, that sounds nice. Okay.
yeah, I mean, when you have to choose between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, I think now's the best time to be a libertarian.
Hmm. Yeah, and ultimately, what what I choose to promote, whether it's the libertarian values or my own personal values, it seems like it lines up with libertarian. And whether I'm not like actively shouting that I am in the party and voting for libertarian candidates, you have indoctrinated me because I kind of get a better understanding now of how all those questions I had about little scenarios with corporations and people, I get it. I get it more. So I could be like, yeah, I do this. I am the guy.
But see, that's cool. That you're proving you're solidifying my life goal, which is just let people hear the aspects of libertarianism, and I think more often than not, people would appreciate them. So
I
thank you
like it.
for thank you.
I will try to help as best I can.
You're a an angel got his wings this day.
Oh, please, please.
All right, my brother. Okay, I'm gonna end the broadcast.
Can I plug real quick?
Oh, plug it up.
Yes, I have a podcast also called Us in the Universe. You can find it on usintheuniverse.com. Adam is a frequent guest, and we talk about all sorts of stuff, and it's a little lighthearted. So if you're looking for some goofing off, feel free to have a listen, like and comment and subscribe. Pay me a visit. Thank you. That's it.
Yes, definitely. Henry is the reason why I got into podcasting in the first place. It has a lot of great content. If you listen to me, you're definitely going to like his stuff. So definitely check it out. Also, a little bit of housekeeping on my part. I am getting rid of the name Sparrow Speaks, changing the name to Dojo Intellective, because I want to take a little bit less emphasis off of me and what I'm saying and just make it more about just objective ideas and philosophies and stuff like that. And I'm going to be talking to a lot of other people, so it's more going to be about what they're saying and not really about what I'm saying. Um, so that change is going to happen soon, so don't get confused. But other than that, any last words, Henry?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me, man. This was fun.
Same here, brother. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, buddy.
Peace.
Peace.